Hi, everybody. My name is Michael D. Nato, and I'm back to read a little bit more from one of my books. Today, I'm going to be reading a passage from The Darkness Falls, Book 3 in the Lithanol series. This one I enjoy thoroughly. There's a dragon you meet in Book 2, and his fate is unknown. And in this part of Book 3, near in the beginning, you actually get to see what happens to the dragon. I'll leave the rest to you to figure out. Don't forget, if you want, hit subscribe, hit that little notification bell, and then every time I post, you'll know. Without further ado, the Silver Sword Pass, Northern Lithanol. Elandril shaded his eyes against the rising sun once more and tried to see what had made the ground shake 10 days ago. They all thought he was crazy, but he had seen a huge shape come down out of the clouds and disappear in the low mountains around the pass somewhere. The wardens said it was the earth shifting or some nonsense, but he knew it was something else. Iliandril was on duty in the Silver Sword Pass, and that usually meant staying on the elven side and making sure no one wandered through accidentally, even though no one had come through the pass in 10 years. He had gone out every day since then, looking for a sign of what had fallen from the sky, but had found nothing. Brooding again, Iliandril? Warden Iverson asked. He knew the young elf meant well, but this theory of his was getting him nowhere. No, sir. Just scanning the range before I head out again, sir. Leandril knew the elves behind him were snickering. He could hear them. He saluted Warden Iverson and smiled at the elder elf. The warden wore his white hair in shoulder length, and his leathers were dyed off-white, the better to hide him in the northern snows. Everyone respected the warden, and his skill with shorter swords was legendary. Well, I can't stop you from your free time, but you only have a day's leave. If you don't want to spend that in the city with your family, then so be it. For the record, though, I think you're crazy. The warden patted the young soldier on the shoulder and turned to regard the others. They all stopped laughing immediately. Weapons aren't going to clean themselves now, are they? Leandro walked away with his head held high. He was young for an elf, almost 40 years old. He had bright green eyes and wore his hereditary white hair cut shoulder length. His leathers were simple brown, and his pouches hung from small hooks around his waist. He was a simple scout, but he had dreams of becoming a warden someday. His training in wizardry was coming along well, and in another 20 years he could attempt to banish the darkness within himself. Then they wouldn't laugh at him any more. Leandril turned towards the pass and traveled down past the last checkpoint. He had tried every path in the mountains to see if there were any craters or debris, but hadn't found anything. Time to go further down the pass this time, he thought, as he steeled himself against the unknown. He had never been this far into the pass. If the Shran Kreth were right, then there could be humans just waiting to ambush him at any minute. Eleandril smiled as he thought of the isolationist faction and their warnings of the many dangers that could befall the wayward elf. All nonsense, if you ask me, he thought. He turned the bend and continued towards the end of the pass that exited into Lithanol. His world turned upside down as he saw a group of humans pointing at the side of the mountain before the entrance of the pass. Then a wave of fear hit him like a wet blanket of terror. Leandril turned, and his eyes went even wider as he stared into the immense eye of a dragon. Dragon! Leandril called out as the breath left him. Karsus not only heard the elf, but saw the dragon turn his eye to the elf and raise his eyebrow. Rather loud, aren't they? Karsus asked the dragon. He hoped it wasn't starving, at least. He really didn't want to tangle with a dragon this old right now. Scratch that. Ever. Last time I did, I lost my hand, he thought with a smirk. Kanth and Rhoe was alive, but barely. He wasn't even sure how long he had been here. Fading in and out of consciousness would do that. Then he felt the presence of someone behind him and worried that the incarnation had come to finish him off. Not that he could do anything about it, but Kanth hadn't worried about anything in so very long that the sensation was new to him. Then he saw the unicorn and fairy with a bunch of humans and knew that his day had gone from worse to, well, he didn't have a word for it yet, but it was bad. Kanth was about to speak to the auburn-haired foppish one when he felt another presence from the pass. Hearing the scream of dragon, he turned his eye and saw an elf. Maybe this little elf is a wizard and can help me, he thought. But the elf lost his breath and fell to his knees. Fantastic. Just my luck. a scaredy elf. He heard the foppish one ask if they were allowed. The man spoke clearly and precisely without fear whatsoever. Why, as a matter of fact, yes, Kanth answered. He tried to turn his head to face the man, but it was no use. He had no strength left. Mind shutting him up while I try to turn my head again? Kanth asked, trying to buy some time. Rhoe couldn't move. It seemed worse that the thing was speaking. That was when he recognized the dragon. Rhoe focused his strength inside and down to his center, sent an angry letter to his feet, and a complaint in triplicate to his brain. He concentrated on the cloud of fear around his heart. Snap! He was free. Rhoe spun towards Lys and grabbed her shoulders. Lys, look at me. In my eyes. Rhoe was going on instinct now, letting the magic within him guide his thoughts. When her trembling face met his, he closed his eyes, holding the image of her eyes, and sent his center out to her, cutting through the threads of fear like fire through spider webs. Lys was rooted to the spot with an overwhelming fear. She could think of nothing except what stood in front of her, that it shouldn't be that big. Then suddenly he was there, her Roven. She heard his words and moved her eyes to gaze upon his and was shocked sane by the sight. Tiny fires danced within Rhoe's eyes, and then they came towards her, into her own, even though they were closed. She flinched. She couldn't even blink, and then it was over. Alessana Evernight stumbled back and felt renewed. She felt Rhoe's power running through her veins and cleared the fear from her like a blast of cold water. Rhoe, is there anything you can't do? Lys asked, humbled. Well, I can't walk along a river without falling in. Rhoe turned and looked at Karsus. This was the dragon I saw in the mountains, Karsus, the one fighting the incarnation. He noticed that Averin was touching his horn to Liana, and it seemed to free her as well. Rhoe winced at the thought of her being unafraid of the dragon and what she might do now. Apparently, Karsus had the same thought. Stop! Karsus said in a fairly loud tone. He was staring right at the tiny fairy as he strode towards her with one hand out, his other suddenly holding an old charred staff that had appeared out of nowhere. He had a pleading look on his usually stern face. Liana, please contain yourself and stay away from the dragon. It was not phrased as a question. Liana was no longer afraid of the massive creature. She also wasn't stupid. She turned her face towards the bard and put on her best who me look. Karsus, don't worry, she started, talking very slowly, like she was afraid she would spook the rather large beast. I'm curious, not suicidal. There's a difference? Rhoe couldn't help it. These kind of remarks were what Gareth always scolded him for. Liana stuck her tongue out at him and fluttered her wings. Are you all mad? Eliandro couldn't believe what he was seeing. They were actually arguing amongst themselves in front of one of the most feared creatures in existence. Eliandro was shaking so hard he still couldn't feel his feet. He wasn't even sure if he had feet at this point. No, just me, Karsus answered the elf without looking at him, his gaze now fixed upon the dragon. The bard walked around so that the eye wasn't staring to see him. So it would seem that you know our mutual enemy, Karsus said casually, holding the charred staff in both hands now and leaning on it. It was one of his safeguards against fire, and it was very powerful, but only in certain situations. Legend said it used to be one of the 3 sacred treasures of a lost city to the west, but he couldn't find anything on what happened to it. Kanth could hardly believe his withering ears. A human had seen him fighting in the mountains? He knew there was no one else around them, so that left only magic, and powerful magic at that. Kanth had heard of wizards seeing from afar, but those that did were masters at their craft, not this young. The dragon sniffed the warm air and drew in the boy's scent. It was mingled with the girl's. That's when he noticed the hair. The boy somehow had elven blood. He turned his focus back to the bard, who seemed a lot more powerful than any bard he had ever known. Yes, I left him piled under a cliff, but the damage had been done. I fear I don't have long on this world. Karsus saw that the dragon was infected with the same rotting disease that the incarnation used, and, by the looks of the disease, had been gnawing at the dragon for a long time. How did you survive until now? I used my breath to heal what I could, but the fire has finally given out inside of me. Now that I have exhausted the flames within, I shall succumb very soon. Kanth wasn't ready for the twilight the dragons went to when they died, but he was out of options. Can't Averin heal him with his horn? Rhoe felt that the creature deserved more than a death like this. Do we really want to heal a dragon that might devour us? Liz had only heard stories, but they all seemed so very plausible looking at the size of this great beast. Kanth was impressed with the young boy. Good thought, but a unicorn's horn, though powerful, can't heal a wound this strong. Kanth swung his eye towards the girl and saw that she stood like a warrior. But don't worry, young one. You humans taste horrible. Gamey, really, especially the young ones. Karsus laughed, knowing that dragons rarely ate people. They killed them, yes, but usually after the human had done something foolish or stupid. The companions of Evernight had stopped a few dragons in their time, but never once had to fight them to the death. It was very hard to kill them. He wished he could think of something to help the dragon, but even he was out of ideas. His magic wouldn't even touch this level of decay. Karsus knew that Rhoe was able to stop the decay from affecting people, but that was before they were touched. Then Rhoe opened his mouth and shocked them all. Well, if I'm supposed to be the one that can stop the incarnation's power, what if Averin channels his horn through me? Rhoe didn't actually know if it would work, but he almost positive that the dragon would die if he didn't try something. Karsus, this boy just floored two of the most magical beings in the land. I fear that he could be right, Averin said to everyone. He mentally shrugged, then stared again at the young wizard, trying to figure out if his power would overwhelm the boy before he could use it. It wouldn't hurt him, but he might pass out. Well, the unicorn is right. I'm floored. Kanth knew suddenly and without doubt that he was in the company of someone destined to become one of the most powerful wizards ever known. He had met powerful mages before in ages past, but they never had the compassion that stirred within one so young. And the control he had. This half-grown human broke through his fear like it was nothing. All right, young one, if you are willing to try it, then I'm ready. Rhoe, are you sure? Liz was still in awe of the dragon, but now that Rhoe was involved, she was a bit more focused. It's not that she wanted it to die, but she was worried about Rhoe. Well, no, but it's worth a shot if Averin will try. Rhoe looked at Karsus and saw the bard staring open-mouthed at him. He thought it was weird that Karsus had been so quiet. What's the matter, Karsus? Is it going to kill me or something? Rhoe had never seen his mentor with that look on his face before. Karsus was trying not to cry. He had been surprised by this boy before, but this went beyond that. The bard was truly moved. This young wizard was ready to try something, possibly dangerous, just to save another. It didn't matter that it was a dragon or a pig. The thought was the same because Rhoe didn't know that he would be fine. The boy would be safe, as a unicorn's power could never hurt someone so pure, but Rhoe didn't know that. I'm just truly proud of you, Roven. No, it won't kill you. You'll be fine, but hurry. He doesn't have long. Karsus saw the dragon shudder. Rhoe stepped up and laid his hand upon the rotting scales of the dragon's head. What is your name? Kanth, but you may call me Kanth. The dragon tried to keep his eyes open, but he just couldn't anymore. Kanth could feel his scales rotting faster and faster. Beneath them, his flesh was writhing in agony. Then hold on, Kanth. I don't know what this is going to feel like. For either of us. Rhoe turned to see Averin walking reverently towards him and Lyanna staring quietly in awe. Quiet for the first time in her whole life. Hit me, Averin, before I change my mind. Rhoe laughed at the quip. He knew he wasn't going to change his mind. Lyanna flew over to Liz and buried her little face in the girl's neck. I can't watch. Hush, Lyanna. He will be fine. I think he just did something like this to me. This will just be on a grander scale, that's all. At least she hopes so. Averin touched his horn to Rhoe and flooded him with its healing power. The unicorn sent the power flowing through him and into Rhoe, linking to the boy's mind, sending calming thoughts. Averin was shocked yet again to find a sort of calm center already there. It's all right, Rhoe. I'm here now. Let it go. Rhoe felt Averin touch his horn to his shoulder and flood him with power. Rhoe envisioned the power flowing through his center and into his arms, then hands, willing it to spread outward. He felt Averin's shock and almost laughed. I know, Averin. I have it now. Let me know if it gets to be too much. Rhoe opened his eyes and let the energy flow into Kanth, the power rushing out in a torrent, washing over all of the decay and rot that infected the great beast. Still, he could sense it wasn't enough. Rhoe had to think of something. Then he remembered what the dragon said about fire. Kanth had fire within him. Rhoe concentrated and whispered to the darkened, fiery core inside of the dragon, asking it to help him. He could feel it there, a part of the elements that he had been working with, just dormant. Rhoe had never thought of asking the other elements for anything like this before, as Karsus always told him ether was for healing. But in a second, the fire leapt up to meet Rhoe's power, combining with it into a holy white flame. It spilled out of his hands and washed over the dragon scales in a cascade of healing fire. Rhoe could feel it burning the darkness away, but he could tell this still wouldn't be enough. He needed more power. I need more, Avron. May I? The unicorn felt the power combine with the fire and flow through the boy. He was amazed. Then he heard Rhoe ask for more. Suddenly he knew what the young wizard meant by may I. Avron mentally sighed. This would be as close to anyone he had ever been, yet to save a life he was ready. Yes, Rhoe, I give you consent. I've got you. Rhoe reached down and pulled more power from the horn with the will of his mind, pulling it from the depths of the majestic beast's heart. Rhoe channeled the unicorn's force through his own power again and felt the dragon shudder in relief. It was over in less than a minute. As Rhoe pulled back, he sensed it would snap both Avron and himself if he let go too fast. Clamping down on his will, Rhoe let the power go slowly and gently until it was all gone. And it was over. Sinking to his knees, Rhoe saw the faces of his friends and wondered if he was in one piece. They looked horrified. I hope I'm not naked, he thought as he closed his eyes and breathed deep to reset his center. No one could move, not even Karsus. When Rhoe channeled the power, his hair was lifted up as if by a strong wind. Karsus heard him whisper to the fire, and the breath went out of his lungs. Rhoe was going to use fire to heal the dragon. No one had ever tried anything like that, but in theory, it would be the perfect way to heal a dragon. He hadn't even known that dragons healed themselves with fire until today, so there was no way Rhoe could have known. Is he still going on instinct? His thoughts were interrupted when Rhoe burst into flames as well, a brightly burning beacon of holy flame. No! Liz lurched forward, but her hair caught on something. It was only Liana. She reached for the little fairy, but the little one evaded her grip and pulled her hair again. No, Liz! Heel's on fire, you will be burned! Liana couldn't calm down, not faced with the imminent death of another friend. Then Karsus was there, his charred staff disappearing in a pop of displaced air. Liana let go of Liz's hair and slowly fell down to the ground to cry. Karsus wrapped around his arms around the princess, holding her tight. It's all right, Alisana. He's channeling it. The fire won't hurt him unless he lets go, and he is smarter than that. Hell's below. He's smarter than most people I can think of at this point. Smarter than you? Liana asked sincerely through tear-streaked eyes as she sat on the ground. Let's not get hysterical. Karsus laughed and held on to the princess just in case she tried something stupid. It ran in her blood. I need more, Avron, may I? Rhoe shouted. More fire arced into the mighty dragon. Seconds passed as they all stared in horror as Rhoe's clothes burned away, but his flesh remained untouched. Flames licked his hair, which flailed like they were in a thunderstorm. Suddenly the roar of the fire dwindled, his hair fell, and slowly, ever so slowly, the fire went out. Avron stumbled back and lay down on his stomach, resting his horn to the ground. Rhoe looked up with a quizzical look on his face. Leandro stumbled and fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He had never heard any story of humans that spoke of such courage, such compassion. He had seen this young boy, who was obviously somehow a wizard, risk his life for a dragon. What's more, he had seen the boy use fire to heal, even though his magic was just beginning. He knew that was impossible. Who are you people? Karsus spun around, letting his coat fan out as usual. I am known as Karsus the Bard. He paused for dramatic effect. He always did. You may have heard of me. Iliandril decided right then that it would be the perfect time to pass out, and his brain complied generously. Bliss ran over to Rhoe after Carsus let go of her and wrapped her cloak around him, helping him up. You all right there, Rhoe? Well, apparently naked, but I feel like I just showered in very hot rain. Am I making sense? It doesn't sound like I'm making any sense. Rhoe couldn't even tell if the two dragons were moving. Two dragons? That's it, I need a nap, he thought, and promptly sat down once more, this time with feeling. Liana was torn. She had three people that she wanted to fly to and console, but she was only one small fairy. This is what it must feel like to rule, she thought, in a moment of perfect clarity. She chose Avron, feeling responsible for him since she was the ambassador to the fairies and all. Avron, are you all right? Did your horn burn out? She was trying to speak slowly and clearly, just like he always told her to. She didn't know why she felt like she should. Avron felt like he had just fallen off a castle, hit the ground, and then rolled for 5 miles, over small rocks. Everything hurt, yet at the same time he had never felt cleaner. The unicorn felt like everything had been burned away, except obviously the aches and pains. Yes, little one, I fear I will live, he thought only to her. He was pleasantly surprised that she was so attentive, though he worried what that meant for the universe. Kanth and Rhoe stretched out and slowly pulled away from the hillside. Dirt and rocks rolled down, but he was careful not to shower the people around him too badly, especially this young wizard. He had never, nor would he again for that matter, feel that kind of power course through him. This boy was more than just a wizard. He had known his share of archmages as well, and none of them could have done that. Are you in one piece, young wizard? Rhoe looked up and finally saw only one dragon. That statement says a lot about my 10-day, doesn't it? He thought to himself with a chuckle. Rhoe, what now? Kanth wondered if the boy had burned out his brain. My name is Rhoe. He tried to stand and felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked and saw that it was Carsus holding him down. Stay down, Rhoe. You can talk from there. Carsus turned to face the now healthy dragon and put on his best smile. So how does it feel? Carsus couldn't imagine what was going through this creature's mind right now. Well, that wasn't entirely true, but he liked to think it wasn't thinking what he was thinking, at least. I've never felt better. Now, Rhoe. Kanth turned his eye directly towards Rhoe and lowered his head even more. I haven't seen courage like that since I wore green scales. I owe you a debt of life, and to a dragon that is a mighty thing indeed. Know that you and your family are always safe from me, and I will always try to help when I can. You have but to ask the ether and call me by name, and I will hear it. There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Rhoe, say thank you to the night dragon, Carsus said. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. A life debt? He had met others with those kind of debts before, but never with a dragon. Carsus tried not to feel jealous and failed miserably. The young warrior turned wizard was too stunned to speak. Finally, Rhoe bowed his head and tried to stand, brushing off Carsus's hand and leaning on Liz. I am honored, Kanth and Rhoe, and I do not take this pledge lightly. Farewell, then, and may your wings always keep you aloft. Kanth gave a warning look, and they all backed up. He flexed his powerful legs and shot up into the sky, waiting until he was well above them to flap his wings. The powerful motion still whipped dust and dirt around, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. He shot up into the sky and decided he would find his cave and take a long, good nap. Or 5. And I'll end there. That is an excerpt from The Darkness Falls, the 3rd book in the Lithanol series. And you can see that I'm trying to keep the continuity of some of the stories by mentioning older parts that you've already read. Not like they've forgotten them, you know what I mean? Rhoe mentioning that he can do everything but walk along the banks and not fall into a river was actually in book 1. He did that while talking to her in a moment of, I don't know, clumsiness, boy meets girl type of thing, and it was funny. And I like the little things like that and putting them back in for the people that remember the stuff and go, oh my God, that's right. So I hope you've enjoyed. If you'd like to learn more about the books, I have a website and a link tree, both on my Instagram and on the website. And the Facebook page, you can find at Lithanol Series. And my link tree is there as well to the books and more writings. I thank you all for joining me here, and I want you to have a fantastic day. Bye.